Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. The big global story we are tracking this week. US President Donald Trump has hinted that a trade deal with China was possible, but did not clarify further. Trump reportedly told journalists on board the Air Force One that he has always had a great relationship with Chinese President Xi Jinping and that he looks forward to getting along with China. Hints that of a rapprochement comes amid escalated tariff tensions between the two countries. Within a month of taking charge as the president, Donald Trump imposed 10% tariffs on Chinese imports. In retaliation, China levied 15% tariffs on United States LNG and coal, along with 10% duty on oil, farm equipment and automobiles. Even during his first term, Trump had signed a trade deal with China. As per the agreement, China had promised to buy US products worth $200 billion and lower some trade barriers and staying with China. The trade battle as well. Chinese President Xi Jinping also met top business leaders, including tech executives, earlier this week. The president's move signals support to bolster private sector growth in China. Alibaba's Jack Ma, who was sidelined 4 years ago, was spotted attending this meeting. To discuss that and more, we're now joined by Shaun Rein, founder and managing director of the China Market Research Group. Mr. Rein has also authored the book, The Split. Also with us on the show is Einar Tangen, senior fellow at the Taihe Institute. He's also the founder and chairman of Asia Narratives. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Shaun, thank you very much. Let me begin by asking you, let's start with the meeting of tech CEOs that was chaired by Xi Jinping. You had Jack Ma, you had CEOs of Xiaomi, Tencent, all present over there. What were the big takeaways and what's the larger message and significance of this meeting?
Well, it's a huge, significant meeting. If you think about it, Xi Jinping himself hasn't met with the larger Chinese business community in a symposium like this since 2018. So for 7 years now, Chinese entrepreneurs and businessmen and investors have been wondering, has China turned more anti-business? Is it not capitalist? Is it okay to be rich? And that's why you've seen some of the animal spirits in China have gone down over the last few years. So it was a huge, very important meeting for Xi Jinping to pop up and meet with Jack Ma and show a strong signal to domestic investors and international investors that, yes, it's okay to try to be greedy again. It's okay to try to make money. And importantly, the Chinese government is going to work with the private sector to try to spur the economy again, because it is bad. You saw that retail sales only grew 3-4% in 2024. Fixed asset investment was anemic, around 0.1%. on the private sector side, because Chinese consumers and Chinese small business owners have lost their animal spirits. That's why this week, huge signal change for the Chinese economy.
Right. And in our tangent, what do you think will be Xi Jinping's push in terms of economic policy? Now that he met all these tech CEOs, he said that he appreciates the work that you do. Given the significance of that meeting, what is the kind of policy shift that we could possibly see in the coming days?
To see a massive policy shift. What they've done is they've already indicated that they're taking measures to try to encourage, especially foreign investment. And that includes allowing foreign companies to borrow from Chinese banks in order to do business here in China. That's a huge issue, as well as other things, reducing red tape, et cetera. So they're signaling that China is open for business. They've been doing that for quite some time. I do agree with Shaun that this was a very important optical event in terms of meeting with the entrepreneurs. But at the end of the day, China is run by the government and not by private enterprises. This is not the United States.
Absolutely. Shaun, coming to you, looking at the larger possibility of a US-China trade war, how do you see statements which have been coming from Donald Trump saying that he wants to have a good relationship with China? He's also reviewing what had been achieved during the previous trade deals as well. How do you think, will things be as bad as they were last time around?
Well, this actually might surprise a lot of your audience in India, but Chinese tend to prefer Trump than they prefer Biden and prefer Harris. So when it came to Biden, they thought that Biden was an ideologue. He was an imperialist. Because of great power relations, he wanted to contain China's economic rise and destabilize the CPC. You look at it, when the Chinese got good at apps, like Shine or TikTok, the Americans under Biden called it a national security threat. When the Chinese got good in cotton, 20% of the world's cotton comes from Xinjiang. The Americans under Biden said genocide, forced labor. So there's a feeling under Biden and Harris that there'd be 20 years of a Cold War. But when it comes to Trump, there's a feeling that a deal can be made. Now, I'll give an example. Trump has said, I don't want the Chinese to export their NEV vehicles to the United States. I want them to build factories in the US, hire American workers, and create economic growth in the United States. Now, that's fair, right? That's what the Chinese did to Buick and Ford and GM in the 1990s. And they said, if you want to get access to the Chinese middle class, you have to build factories in China. That's what Trump is saying and dangling a carrot to the Chinese business community and government. So the Chinese just want a pathway. They want a way to be able to do business in the United States, whether it be sell a 50% stake of TikTok so they can open up there. So there's a feeling that a deal can be made with China and the United States. Now, here's the thing. I don't know if a deal is going to be made in year 1, year 2, or year 3, but it's clear that Trump has a pathological desire to get a deal done and to say to MAGA, I beat the Chinese. A deal will be made in the coming years.
Right. Einar, Tangen, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has said that trade wars and tariff wars produce no winners. US and China should resolve concerns through dialogue and consultation, and China will take necessary measures to resolutely protect its legitimate rights and interests. And we've seen the moment Donald Trump had imposed 10% tariffs on certain Chinese products, China did the same. In fact, imposed a 15% retaliatory tariff. What are the areas where possibly China could give Donald Trump some concessions?
Well, I mean, China has had an open hand policy towards the U.S. They're happy to buy more goods and services. The problem is that the U.S. has something that China wants, which is these high technology. And that is the one area where the U.S. says no. So you have the U.S. saying, well, we want you to buy what we want you to buy, but not what you want to buy. So it's a difficult relationship. I agree with Shaun that there are definitely, they saw the Harris-Biden administration as ideological and Trump is transactional. They believe they can deal with transactional. But, in the end, what we have here is a situation where Donald Trump is doing perhaps the greatest favor to China that any U.S. president has ever done in terms of making it clear to his allies and his neighbors that he doesn't care. He put 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, although the U.S. is the greatest importer of steel and aluminum and does not have the capacity to satisfy its domestic needs. That just pushes the price of domestic and international American goods up further. And it wasn't that they were that competitive to begin with. Obviously,
Right.
Obviously, everything that's going on with, especially Canada and what he's doing in Europe, very, very concerning to them. But for China, they're hanging back and they're watching what happens.
Right. Shaun, coming to you, going back to that tech meeting and considering that the China-US trade war will not just be about manufacturing, it will be about AI, it will be about technologies of the future. Do you get a sense that President Xi Jinping and the Chinese government is going to increase capital expenditure to further innovation in artificial intelligence? Companies like DeepSeek, we've seen the kind of impact DeepSeek has had on the AI world, especially on global stock markets, IT stocks especially. Do you think if China wants to stay ahead of the race, Xi Jinping will be putting much more money, much more capex into tech innovation?
So China's had an aging and a broken growth playbook, and the Chinese government understood that. Too much of the economic growth was based off of real estate. At one point, about 35% of the overall economy was based on real estate or on heavy infrastructure investment into subways. So the government has said, we need to switch towards what Xi Jinping calls new productive forces. We need to focus on NEVs, and we need to focus on indigenous innovation. And that's clearly what China has already been doing the last several years. They've allocated tens and tens of billions of dollars towards investing in semiconductors. And this is why I think Biden and Trump have shot the United States in the foot with all of their tariffs and export controls. You know, NVIDIA, one of their largest clients before was Huawei. Now, because of the export controls, NVIDIA can't sell to Huawei anymore. And NVIDIA has said, well, actually, Huawei is one of our biggest competitors. You see Intel, once one of the great semiconductor companies, is tottering on the brink of an acquisition by Broadcom and TSMC. That's all because of these export controls. China knows it has to focus on indigenous innovation. And that's why my new book, The Split, that just came out in India last month, I have a couple chapters talking about how the government and the private sector both are focused on semiconductors, AI. And the exciting part is AI. You've talked about DeepSeek before, but you look at it, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, once said that China was 10 years behind in AI. Last year, he said that China was 2 or 3 years behind. Now we've seen with DeepSeek that they're as good, if not better, than ChatGPT by OpenAI. The future is going to be indigenous innovation in China. And what's exciting is that the Chinese are going to start to export to the global south. I prefer to call it to the global majority. Countries like India, countries like Saudi Arabia would be smart to work with Chinese tech companies because the Americans have weaponized not just SWIFT, but they've weaponized technology. So if India wants to become a economic powerhouse, they should work with China rather than the United States, because if they don't heed America's words, the Americans might slap export bans on the Indians too.
Okay, and my final word from Einar. Einar, how do you see the recent meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Donald Trump in Washington, D.C.? There were a lot of takeaways. They also set a roadmap for finalizing a trade deal in the next few months. So how does China view this in terms of the India-China economic roadmap?
Well, I mean, China does not view as a threat any kind of economic trade deal. I mean, they're very, very hopeful. The position of Beijing is that they're hoping that India will stand up. The more that India is prosperous, the more independent it is, and the more it will pursue an agenda which is not only good for India, but also the rest of Asia. So the rise of Asia is something that they see as inevitable because of markets, movement of capital, wealth, etc. And quite frankly, they'd like to see everybody in the same boat rising. And a destabilized or poor India is not in China's interest. It is something that somehow gets lost in translation between the countries. But sincerely, Beijing wishes India well, and if they can deal with Trump, all the power to them.
All right. Thank you very much, Einar, Tangen and Shaun Rein, for joining us on the program, talking about the US-China trade tensions right now and what China could do over the next few years. We're going to take a short break here, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we're going to get you more on the elections in Germany. Why are they important? We will be getting you an interview with Ambassador Subrata Bhattacharjee, a former diplomat and ambassador to Chile. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with lots more. Welcome back. You're watching Global Eye. Germany's Eurozone's biggest economy goes to the polls this Sunday in what has been touted to be the most significant election in the country's recent history. Snap elections were called after the coalition government headed by Olaf Scholz collapsed in December, while opinion polls predict the Christian Democratic Union, led by Friedrich Merz, to emerge as the single largest party. Alternative for Germany, a far-right party, is expected to finish second. And while the AfD might not find a place in the government as other parties are expected to refuse to do business with them, it might just end up reshaping the country's political landscape. Let's take a look at the key themes in this election in Germany.
What are the issues fueling this snap election? Germany has long been Europe's biggest economy, but for the past 2 years, it's been in decline. Rising energy prices played a big role in that, and they remain a formidable challenge for both households and businesses. Friedrich Merz, the CDU opposition leader, had strong words for Olaf Scholz, arguing he led Germany into economic crisis while chancellor.
I'm somewhat amazed, Mr. Chancellor, at your perception. We are now in the third year of a recession. This has never happened before in Germany. Stopping this will be a huge effort, so I have to tell you, I'm somewhat shocked by the perception you have here this evening of the state of our economy.
A slew of violent attacks linked to foreign suspects have raised concerns about both security and migration, prompting political parties to demand stricter measures on migration. Germany's net population rose by over 3.5 million between 2014 and 2024, driven entirely by migration. Since 2022, Germany has taken in over 2 million refugees. The AfD party, Alice Weidel in particular, has called for borders to be closed and asylum seekers to no longer have the right to family reunification.
What I stand for is to stop this illegal migration and that we must separate ourselves from the people who are in our country illegally and who have committed criminal offenses.
The conservative Christian Democrats have also adopted a stricter stance on immigration, including pushing back asylum seekers at the borders. Some voters believe that the parties themselves have made this a red-button issue. Both a stagnating economy and tensions over migration have fueled the rise of the far-right AfD party. Its biggest political win on a federal level came earlier this year, when it helped the passing of a vote sponsored by the leader of the German conservatives. Most of Germany's major parties refuse to work with the AfD, and many protests against the AfD party have broken out across Germany, with voters like Antje Marta worried about a possible shift to the right. Germany's mainstream parties all favor helping Ukraine fend off Russia's invasion with weapons and supplies. However, Scholz and his Social Democrats have recently struck a more cautious tone, emphasizing the need for diplomacy. The AfD is among those who want an end to weapons deliveries to Kyiv and a resumption of good relations with Moscow.
And joining us now to take this discussion forward is former diplomat Subrata Bhattacharjee. Ambassador Bhattacharjee has served in Germany in different capacities. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, sir. Let me begin by asking you, do you get a sense that it is the Christian Democratic Union led by Friedrich Merz who is in the driver's seat and they will be winning this election?
If you see over the time, the opinion polls have generally been very predicting it fairly correct. Even the last election, when the SPD has a lead, it was correctly predicted by the opinion polls. So going by that, just 2 days left before the election, I would guess that the CDU will take the lead. They're showing 30%. That, of course, might not be enough to form the government, but they have a lot of choices. Right. They had grand call. Yeah, please come.
I would also like to ask you, sir, how do you think the outcome of this election will impact issues such as Ukraine, Germany's support for Ukraine, and also immigration into Europe?
Immigration into Europe might go for a change, because you see, even the CDU had a stand at the time of former Chancellor Angela Merkel. They had to update, they had to change the views. And the current CDU also understands the public mood against the new immigrant, the wave of immigrants coming. So I guess if the CDU forms a government, and perhaps it will form, it has to take into account and take a pragmatic approach on the immigration issue. As for the Ukraine, I think the bigger global player in the Ukraine will now be USA and Russia, how they decide the matter. Europe will play a role, but the role that USA has been playing will have a more predominant deciding factor. So Ukraine thing will shape us more on its own. But the immigration issue in Europe is something new German government will contribute significantly and might initiate changes.
All right. What I'd also like to ask you, do you think Angela Merkel's open-door asylum policy was unwarranted and led to the rise of the far right as well in Germany?
There has been general feeling that such an open-door policy, getting a lot of immigrants into Germany, not only Germany, even some of the other EU member countries resisted it, caused certain amount of economic hardship, the difficulty in assimilation, all those cause a friction, and certainly it helped. I would guess that it did help AfD to gain popularity. Perhaps that is the why the new CDU leadership has sensed the public mood and made changes in its policy on the immigrants.
Right. What I'd also like to ask you, sir, we've spoken about the immigration rate policy, then the issue of economy. We saw the CDU, Friedrich Merz, their leader, speaking about how Germany has been in recession and they need to be taken out of this recession and it's going to be a difficult task. So what's going to be the approach of the next leader? Do you think they will be more business-oriented, more inward-looking? The focus would be in order to how to bring back more jobs, how to bring back the economy back on track in Germany?
This has to be the policy of the new government for sure. But achieving it will be a very, very challenging task. Currently, the predictions are there that the global economy is going to go for a recession. The developments in USA, developments worldwide, it will be a very challenging time for any government that comes in Germany to kickstart economic growth, to create more employment. This will certainly be a priority, but a challenging task.
Right. Ambassador Bhattacharjee, when it comes to Germany's relationship with the EU, how do you think this could change in the coming years after this election? What is the sentiment as far as Germany's own relationship with the EU goes?
I think this is going for a subtle changes in the EU Parliament. The far right is gaining strength. Different EU countries see the Germany's neighbor, Austria, they have a far right government. Also in other countries like Netherlands, you see what's happening in France, also in Italy, and also in other countries where it's not the far right, but the general anti-immigrant feeling in the East-12 Europe bloc, East Europe countries like Poland and others, Hungary. So the composition in the European Parliament, the far right is gaining more strength, is going to be reality. So that's going to play a crucial role in the coming years, the EU policy on immigration and other issues, certainly, for sure.
All right, so the far right will have a clear impact on Germany's policies on immigration and also relationship with the European Union. As far as Germany's own relationship with India goes, this has been a strong relationship. Any friction points that you see which would need ironing out in the years to come? Ambassador Bhattacharjee?
Let me speak objectively. Let's start from the point where India started the economic reform, say early 90s. I was then in Germany, then as a young diplomat. We had a CDU government, Helmut Kohl. India continued with its close relations. Then came Schröder, SPD. It didn't change. The difference over the years, we see we have been the government run by CDU, by SPD, Grand Coalition, with FDP joining, not joining, even the Greens being the part of the current government. We had a visit of Chancellor from Germany. So India-Germany relations are multifaceted. We have a large Indian community. We have a lot of German investment, very high bilateral trade, over $25–30 billion, over $15 billion German investment. German Mittelstand, the middle-aged companies, have a strong tie-up. We have a number of joint working groups on different economic aspects. The old cultural relations from the time of Max Muller, many Indologists being taught in different German universities. So these strong relations continued unabated, despite the changes in governments in India and the changes in government in Germany. Coming to AfD, what is their policy? As I see, their policy has been anti-immigrant, certain amount of anti-immigrant sentiment, but they never articulated anything against Indian community. In fact, they welcome the qualified, the skilled, the IT professionals, and their economic policy does not in any way conflict with the stronger economic ties with India. So I do not see any adverse impact on India-German relations, depending on the outcome of this.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. All right. Good to talk to you, sir. Thank you very much for joining us here on CNBC-TV18, giving us your view on the very important German election and how this political event could also change the way Germany functions and approaches geopolitics. Thanks once again for being with us. That's all we have time for here on Global Eye. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.